It was a war fought in the shadow of World War II, a war that never truly ended. Millions would die. From 1950 to 1953, Korea, a nation divided by foreign powers, became the crucible of Cold War rivalry. Cities would burn, and yet for decades it would be called the Forgotten War. This is the story of the Korean War, a clash of ideologies, a test of wills, and the moment the Cold War turned hot. For centuries, Korea had been one nation. But in 1910, it fell under the iron grip of Imperial Japan. For 35 years, Korean language and culture were suppressed, and its people endured forced labor and occupation. Then in 1945, the Second World War ended. Japan surrendered, and the Allies faced a sudden question: who would govern Korea? In a rushed decision, 2 American officers drew a line across a National Geographic map, the 38th parallel. Soviet forces would accept Japan's surrender in the north. The United States would do so in the south. It was meant to be temporary. It became permanent. The division created 2 distinct nations, each with its own identity and struggles. In the south, South Korea experienced rapid growth and modernization, thriving as a democracy. In stark contrast, North Korea descended into isolation under a rigid dictatorship marked by repression and hardship. Families were torn apart, dreams shattered, as both Koreas forged their separate paths, forever haunted by their shared past. Neither side trusted the other. By 1948, the Cold War was in full swing, and each half of Korea had its own government and its own army. In the north, Kim Il-sung, a former guerrilla fighter backed by Moscow, led the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In the south, Syngman Rhee, a staunch anti-communist, became president of the Republic of Korea. Each claimed the entire peninsula. War was now only a matter of time. As the world watched, the divide deepened, with each nation preparing for the inevitable confrontation that loomed on the horizon. Propaganda fueled the fire on both sides, each depicting the other as an enemy, while the common people felt the weight of impending chaos. With tensions mounting, both nations braced for the storm, unaware that the clash would not only change Korea, but resonate through history. Dawn June 25, 1950. Without warning, 75,000 North Korean soldiers backed by Soviet tanks and artillery stormed across the 38th parallel. Witness voice, South Korean refugee. We woke to the sound of explosions. People were running, carrying only what they could hold. We didn't know where to go. Seoul fell in just 3 days. The South Korean army collapsed in confusion. President Truman condemned the attack and called for immediate United Nations action. In New York, the UN Security Council voted to defend South Korea, a rare moment when the Soviet Union's boycott of the UN allowed such a resolution to pass. General Douglas MacArthur was given command of a multinational force, but on the ground the situation was desperate. By August 1950, South Korean and UN forces had been pushed into a shrinking corner at the southeast tip of the peninsula, the Pusan perimeter. Here, American Marines Army units and South Korean troops dug in. The heat was suffocating. Ammunition was short, and the enemy was relentless. We didn't sleep much. Every night they attacked. Every night we pushed them back. We couldn't give up. There was nowhere to go. From the skies, US aircraft bombed North Korean supply lines. Slowly, the momentum of the invasion began to stall. As the relentless days turned into weeks, the atmosphere grew heavy with desperation and determination. Each soldier knew the stakes. It was not just survival, but the fate of their homeland. In the midst of chaos, bonds formed stronger than steel, as bravery was continuously tested. Despite the weariness, the mantra of holding the line echoed in their hearts, driving them to face another night of attacks. MacArthur believed a bold move could turn the tide. He proposed landing at Incheon, far behind enemy lines. The tides there were treacherous, the channels narrow. Many thought it was madness. If it failed, the war could be lost. But if it succeeded, it could change everything. On September 15th, under a gray dawn sky, US Marines stormed Incheon. Within days, Seoul was recaptured. North Korean forces caught between Incheon and Pusan collapsed in retreat. Now the UN pushed north, beyond the 38th parallel. The goal was no longer just to save South Korea. It was to reunify the peninsula. As UN forces pressed further north, they encountered fierce resistance, but were bolstered by the momentum of their success at Incheon. The streets of Seoul echoed with the cheers of liberated citizens, and hope flickered in the hearts of those who yearned for reunification. Every day, the coalition forces advanced, reclaiming territory and pushing deeper into North Korea, driven by the belief that peace could finally be restored to the peninsula. By October, UN forces reached the Yalu River, the border with China. But to Mao Zedong, this was an existential threat. China had only just emerged from its own civil war. The last thing Mao wanted was an American army sitting on his border. Secretly, hundreds of thousands of Chinese People's Volunteers began crossing into Korea. The trap was set. As the night fell, waves of Chinese soldiers advanced silently, each step bringing them closer to the conflict that loomed. In the heart of China, military leaders convened to plan their response, understanding that the stakes had never been higher. The biting cold of winter enveloped the soldiers as they trudged through the snow, each step echoing their unwavering commitment. In a moment of solidarity, a young soldier rallied his comrades, reminding them of their purpose as they prepared to face an overwhelming challenge ahead. On the night of October 25th, the hills erupted with gunfire as Chinese troops struck in waves, using bugles to coordinate attacks and psychological warfare to unsettle the enemy. They came at night, screaming, blowing horns. You couldn't tell how many there were. It felt like the earth itself was moving toward you as UN forces reeled backward. By January 1951, Seoul fell again, the second time in the war. The bitter Korean winter added to the misery, with soldiers freezing in their foxholes. As the war dragged on, each night brought fresh terror, and the relentless cold became another enemy, forcing the soldiers to confront not only their opponents, but the unforgiving elements. In the heart of the bitter cold, camaraderie became their only warmth, yet as supplies dwindled and hope waned, the reality of war crept ever closer. By mid-1951, the front stabilized near the original dividing line. For the next 2 years, the war became one of attrition. Hilltop battles like Heartbreak Ridge, Pork Chop Hill, and Old Baldy became synonymous with endless grinding combat. Men fought and died over mere yards of earth. We'd take a hill one week, lose it the next, then fight for it again. It never seemed to end. The conditions were harsh, and the landscape was scarred by conflict, giving little respite to those who fought. Each day brought new challenges, and the constant toll of loss, but the determination to endure was etched in the hearts of the soldiers. As the sun set over the battlefield, it painted a somber picture of sacrifice and heroism. Each soldier understood the gravity of their mission, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by a shared sense of duty. In July 1951, peace talks began at Kaesong, later moving to Panmunjom, but they dragged on for 2 years. The sticking point was prisoners of war. Many North Korean and Chinese POWs refused repatriation, fearing execution back home. The question of whether a POW could choose to stay with the enemy was unprecedented, and it nearly derailed the entire process. As the negotiations continued, tensions flared, with each side digging in their heels, unwilling to concede. The soldiers captured in the conflict faced an agonizing choice, caught between loyalty to their homeland and the uncertainty of their futures. The world watched closely as these talks represented not just a path to peace, but a reflection of the human cost of war. In January 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower became US president. He hinted at using nuclear weapons if talks failed. The threat, combined with Stalin's death in March, shifted the balance. On July 27, 1953, the guns finally fell silent. The armistice established a new boundary near the 38th parallel and created a demilitarized zone, or DMZ, a buffer 4 kilometers wide. No peace treaty was ever signed. Technically, the Korean War never ended. Years passed, but the memories lingered. A group of veterans stood together in uniform, their faces reflecting the pride of service intertwined with the sorrow of loss. Meanwhile, Seoul rose from the ashes of conflict, with its modern skyline showcasing resilience and hope for the future. The cost was staggering. Over 36,000 Americans dead. More than 200,000 South Korean soldiers killed. At least 400,000 North Korean and 180,000 Chinese troops lost. Millions of civilians perished. The war left Korea divided, a scar that remains to this day. South Korea would go on to become a vibrant democracy and economic powerhouse. North Korea became one of the most isolated and militarized states on Earth. Korea taught the world that Cold War rivalries could turn into real wars. with real consequences. And for those who fought and those who lived through it, it was anything but forgotten.